Okay.
This is very much a follow-up to our discussion last time, which basically started out with this thing that was bugging me, that you've been telling me about these special commutative Frobenius algebras, which are apparently a central thing in Grothendieck's version of Galois theory. And on the other hand, I've been working with these n-bang torsors, torsors of the group n-bang. And it sort of to me like there's a big overlap in the job that these two things were doing. So I wanted to understand the relationship between these two things. And that's what we started thinking about. And in the discussion last time, I basically came down to thinking informally, semi-formally about ways of extracting a special commutative Frobenius algebra from an n-bang torsor. And so I want to pursue that some more now, and partially because we may be getting some different answers to some of the questions, or it may be just that we've modified the questions or something like that. So first of all, let's think about this idea of extracting a. Sorry, I always forget what the S stands for. The S stands for special. Is that right? Special commutative. I hope I didn't say it wrong too many times. A special commutative Frobenius algebra. So I want to start focusing on this way of extracting a special commutative Frobenius algebra from an n-bang torsor. And so we talked about it in various ways, but how do I want to talk about it now? Well, as usual, we want to shift between highbrow levels and lowbrow levels and middlebrow levels. Let me perhaps start with I don't know if this, as usual, I'm not really sure if this is the highbrow level or the lowbrow level. But what I'm thinking of here is that we've got the theory of a special commutative Frobenius, I'll say tensor monoid. TM, there is abbreviation for tensor monoid. Do we have a favorite letter to use for a Frobenius algebra? Should we call it F or A or something like that?
Either one of those, maybe A, so it's not a field.
So that theory is supposed to have an interpretation into another theory, which is the theory of an n-bang torsor. How do I get rid of it? It shows my name there every time I'm trying to write, and it annoys the hell out of me. Let's see. I can't write while my name is there. God dang. Didn't do that before. And I need a name for this n-bang torsor. Maybe I'll call it S or X or something like that, or maybe T, I guess. Okay. And well, but this is supposed to be in some doctrine, and we have some leeway in deciding where we should try to interpret this alleged potential interpretation of theories. But I don't know, maybe it is clear that we should do it in, my usual doctrine, which is the doctrine of total two-rigs. Okay. And well, so part of the question is, does this parse, or is that the right word in this context? Parse. I mean, is it really clear what what are these theories? So yes, it's very clear to me what the theory of an n-bang torsor is. Although to make it really clear, maybe I should mention that there's like a base field, K0. And I guess picking this base field K0, which for the moment I'll probably take to be the rationals. Sorry. Sorry, I'm screwing up here because I don't like the way that gives me a very small room to write here. Let me try to write that again. Okay. Yeah, so that choice of base field, that's affecting everything here. And it's affecting the theory on the left and it's affecting the theory on the right. But I think because it's affecting everything, I mean, that probably means that I don't really have to put it into the notation for the individual theories. We'll just put that there in the background. But well, actually, right. Actually, already there's right. There's many choices that we can do here, and so let's think about what the theory on the left is. So first of all, it's coming from the way I'm thinking about it. It's coming from a prop, and we call this the special commutative Frobenius prop. But then we also have to decide whether that's a set valued prop or a vector space valued prop. And if it's a vector space valued prop, then it will, the vector spaces will live over K0. And eventually we will get to K0, but I'm just not quite sure that we should start out there. Maybe we should start out with this being a set valued prop. And then just the fact that it's kind of homming into this vector space valued prop for the n-bang torsor, that's going to sort of encourage the theory on the left to become a vector valued prop as well.
Is this, yeah.
I mean, I can formalize
so the left one you can do it over. There is a set-based prop for special commutative Frobenius.
Well, that's the funny thing. You can also do that over on the right. You can do that over on the right, but then we wouldn't get the correct interpretations, I don't think. I mean, that's a good thing to think about, right? Because then you could take the theory of representations of n-bang on sets.
Yeah, I don't think those would be special commutative Frobenius algebras.
Right, that's part of what you were. That's part of the point of what you were telling me last time, is that it seems like it wouldn't, because you wouldn't have the. So it's funny. There are funny things going on here, but I'm not going to focus on those funny things at the moment, because we really are doing algebraic geometry here, or something like algebraic geometry. So that means that we really are working over this field of K0 and doing algebraic stuff over that in some sense. So
it sounds like you're agreeing with what I would think, which is it might as well just use a vector valued prop to begin with. I mean,
yeah, mostly, yes, but also okay. So and one of our definitions. So right, so I like to have a very definite idea of what this prop is. Otherwise, I'll be faking it or something like that. So I think that what you've been telling me is that the definition of this prop, one of the definitions we use for this prop, we can think of it that the operations in the prop are cospans, or more precisely, cospans up to isomorphism. And these are isomorphisms that fix the domain and the codomain. That's just kind of the apex of the cospan.
That's the set value prop, yeah.
Yes, that's the set value prop. That's right. And then you just linearize that to get the right. So I do like to mention the set value prop because I can define that in terms of cospans very nicely, and then I can just apply this automatic linearization process, which is a kind of left adjoint functor between doctrines. Or there's various ways of thinking about it.
Yep.
But okay, but at this point, let's in fact think of both of these now as linear. Well, so what am I trying to say? So we started out with a prop, and a prop almost tautologically gives you a symmetric monoidal category. But a prop almost automatically gives you a 2 monoid rather than a 2 rig. But we're used to getting a rig from a monoid, but by just taking the monoid rig or the monoid algebra, whatever you call it. And so we want to sort of categorify that process, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, right, that's how you get a 2 rig from a prop, by doing this categorified, what's some of the jargon for that?
Monoid algebra.
Yeah, but what's the word for it? Something like, I don't know, I want to say something about scalars or something like that. I don't know. Linear combinations, whatever.
Yep.
There's some jargon I'm forgetting. So
I guess you can take the precies,
exactly.
the precies on this prop.
That's exactly right. I mean, you could start taking the set valued precies, or you could take, but you could just pass directly to the vector valued precies, and it was sort of like the mod and right. So that precies category doesn't depend on the tensor product in the in the prop. It just depends on the underlying category of the props, so this category of sets and cospans. Oh, I guess one of the things I was trying to say about trying to make sure how well I understand what's going on here is maybe all we need to do to get precise is to say that these are cospans of finite sets, or all the cospans involved are cospans of finite sets. Is that right?
Yeah, we definitely want to stick to those unless you want to get into weird questions.
Okay. So that really should nail it down. But that's the prop that we're dealing with, and we've linearized it. But then also we've made it into not just a 2 monoid, but into a 2 rig by taking the vector valued precies, if you like, or also known as the modules, or maybe it's the it's the modules or the op modules or something like that.
Yeah, I think you can do both those steps in one step by starting with your set valued prop and then taking the functors from that op to vect.
Yes.
And that's sort of more efficient in some sense.
Yes. Well,
more
efficient in some sense. Yeah. Okay.
Less.
Yes, but in some ways, I'm trying to be inefficient. I'm trying to point out all these stop off points that we have. So all right, so we do want to exploit some adjointness between doctrines here. So, and I'm right, and now I'm sort of doing something a little bit formally. Maybe we already did this last time, but we didn't do it quite this formally. So what I'm trying to say is something like I guess I want to exploit the adjointness by exploiting the left adjointness of the thing on the left here, right? That's a good thing to do. Exploit the left adjointness of the thing on the left. So that means that we get this, well, maybe I'll say it's the prop for special commutative, special commutative Frobenius tensor monoids. By the way, I wrote tensor monoids instead of algebras. I meant to comment on just, that's just, it's the way of making it more abstract, right? I mean, trying to make it clearer that it's, that it parses in the doctrine in this abstract way. Yeah. So right. So yeah. So right. We apply this. Categorified linearization or whatever to the prop on the bottom, and we get the theory on the top by basically taking these pre-sheaves. And this prop, at this point, I think I am thinking of this prop. At this point, I want to think of it as a vector valued prop. So it's valued over the vector sheet, valued over the
Okay.
Yeah. And okay, but I notice I'm also being a little bit sloppy here because okay, I'm being like, I mean, we could take like the underlying prop of the theory on the right. And maybe that sort of makes sense, but it's a little bit unwieldy because it's like a big prop. It's got lots of objects and more than like a proper class of objects or something like that.
I thought if you took the underlying prop, you'd throw out a bunch of those objects.
Well, there probably is something like that to do. So I want to say something like, but if So we really think of a prop as like a symmetric monoidal category that's in some sense very strongly generated by a single object. I don't know. I mean, you're right. What we're really going to do is we're going to take a single object over in the category on the left, and we're going to take its concrete prop. The prop of all tensors in that category on that object. And so I'm going to call that, well, what should I call it? I might call it the concrete prop of the tautological representation. So in particular, one of the ideas that we have is that the actual Frobenius tensor monoid A is going to go to the n-bang torsor T. So A is actually going to go to T. So so that means we're interested in the concrete prop of T. So yeah, maybe I should say the concrete prop of T. But since I'm doing things so sloppy here, I'm a little bit hesitant to invoke this big diagram that I've written because this is a very classic diagram that's supposed to say, oh, we're applying an adjoint functor here, but I'm being very sloppy here about exactly which adjunction I'm applying. But it really does work. This really does work.
I mean, it should work because you should be able to directly. Well, anyway, you should.
Yeah, it really does work. But we're being
directly define this map.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if
the main thing you need to do is you need to check that T over on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
In the concrete prop is the special commutative Frobenius monoid.
Yes, but I already did sort of at least claim that out loud.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's the kind of thing you can check without needing to figure out what adjoint two functors here.
Sure, but I just want to emphasize that I've sort of written adjointness notation here, but
Yeah, yeah.
argue about how carefully I'm really making it clear. You could do this in a very elegant way, but maybe I'll do it in a less elegant way. But this concrete prop here, this is what I sometimes call a Hecke prop, because it's analogous to maybe what should I call it? The Hecke prop of what? Maybe the Hecke prop of T. T meaning the total. I guess I should call it the tautological action. How do I write this? Where's my? Sorry. Very annoyed by the way this moves cursors around. The tautological action T of n bang. Again, this is really hard to read my writing, but it's already very messy. So yeah, there's this Hecke prop, which is supposed to be very analogous to a Hecke algebra. So, right, one of the definitions of a Hecke algebra is, right, the word Hecke algebra is used in a number of different ways in mathematics, but really when you understand them, they're really all almost the same way, but you just have to be careful about how the terminology parses a little bit. But roughly the idea is that a Hecke algebra is an algebra of Hecke operators. And Hecke operators are intertwiners between I guess Hecke operators are endo intertwiners on a permutation representation of a group. And there's a very nice theorem that says that the basic Hecke operators are represented by double cosets, because the double cosets give you these 0-1 matrices that you can write down that represent these intertwiner operators. And these intertwiner operators, you can also think of them as very special cases of tensors, right? Intertwiners are like invariant operators. You can also think of them as equivariant operators, but you can just, in this context, equivariant really means practically the same thing as invariant if you squint at it, right? And so, an operator is a 1,1 tensor, but now we're interested in tensors with more general index setups. And so we can still talk about invariant tensors, just like you can talk about the Hecke operators being the invariant 1,1 tensors. You can talk about general Hecke tensors being these invariant under the action of in this case, under the action of the group n bang, the action of that on T. Sorry, I'm just trying to distinguish very relatively carefully here between two different actions that you could talk about invariance under. If you have a tensor, you could talk about permuting the indexes. You could talk about invariance in that way, and I don't want to talk about that. But rather, I'm talking about the fact that these tensors are tensors that live on a permutation representation. And so you can have the group, which happens to be n bang, acting on those tensors, and you talk about the tensors being invariant, and the tensors can have, the tensors could be A, comma, B, A input indexes and B output indexes, et cetera, like that. So, I mean, what am I saying? I'm saying that, a Hecke algebra is built out of, or it contains Hecke operators. And even that used to be a fairly closely guarded secret. People wouldn't tell you that Hecke operators are really related to Hecke algebras, but they really are. That things in a Hecke algebra can be interpreted as Hecke operators. And algebra of Hecke operators is a Hecke algebra. But so just like that happens, we're saying that we have, Hecke tensors. and these form a Hecke prop.
So I've got a question.
Yeah.
So in the case of the plain old Hecke operators,
Yes.
so you have a permutation representation of a group, and
Yes.
then the Hecke operators, I thought, were the ones coming from invariant relations, or maybe invariant spans from that permutation representation to itself. And then sometimes there's a theorem that all invariant operators on the permutation representation are linear combinations of the ones coming from those.
Yeah, we're kind of taking all that for granted, and I did try to say that.
Are you trying to claim that that's true for any finite group, or are you just trying to claim it's? Because I don't know if I ever.
It's true for any finite group, and it's it's and I'm trying to argue that it's almost obvious that a Hecke, it's like, right, so there's invariant matrices, so.
Yeah, but why should all invariant matrices be linear combinations of invariant matrices with zeros and ones, or maybe natural number entries?
With zeros and ones.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, all right, let me try to do some quick example here, okay? Like, let's do n bang as the group, okay?
Well, okay, okay, yeah, I mean, I think that. Okay.
That's too familiar.
No, well, anyway, that's fine. That's one we are actually interested in. So okay, I can't argue.
Yeah.
No,
and so we're having 3 by 3 matrices, and again, we so we've got, we're dealing with operators here. So these are 1, 1 tensors, one input index and one output index. But for some reason, I don't worry about too much. We can be very sloppy about raising and lowering indexes here, basically because
that's fine.
A lot of the props that we're looking at here have some sort of index raising and lowering built into them.
Yep, sure. Permutation representations are like that. Yeah.
And there's also something like that. Well, I'm also confused about the extent to which that happens in the Frobenius prop, but that's something we'll talk, or maybe it's different versions of the Frobenius.
Anyway,
yeah,
beginning to get the idea already just from redrawing that matrix there. So
yes. I mean,
it's navigating into all these nuances, but okay. What you're secretly telling me is for that kind of matrix to be invariant or equivariant under the 3 bang action just means that certain entries
the matrix has to be invariant.
Yeah, but that winds up meaning something very simple, which is that certain matrix entries have to equal certain other ones.
Right. So it looks like this. This is what the general Hecke operator looks like in this particular case.
Okay. So then, it's obvious that that's a linear combination of invariant ones with zeros and ones as entries. Okay. Yeah. For some reason, I'd forgotten that. So that's
sure. So A is 1 and B equals 0. That's one of them. And the other one is A is 0 and B is 1. So those are like, basic or atomic Hecke operators, right? Corresponding to the logically atomic invariant relations, which are the orbits, right? I mean, logically atomic relation is supposed to mean like, it can't be broken up into a disjunction.
Mm-hmm.
So it means all one connected orbit. So yeah. So this is like that, and now it works the same way. And now I'm saying it works the same way for Hecke tensors. Now I'm saying it works the same way for Hecke tensors. But now we have a multi-dimensional matrix, and the 0, 1 matrices, the invariant 0, 1 matrices give you a basis. This, let's see, maybe we'll call that the Hecke basis. Yeah, we'll call that the Hecke basis for Hecke prop. Okay.
Okay.
And so it's sort of, depending on how you feel that this sort of thing, it's sort of a fun combinatorial problem, trying to calculate explicit basises and do explicit dimension numerology for these basises for the Hecke prop. Yeah, okay. So anyway, we've got this Frobenius, special commutative Frobenius prop, and now we have this Hecke prop, where to get a particular Hecke prop, we should fix n, and we often fix n equals 3, but we may, usually we get ambitious and fix n equals 3, and then we get scared and we make n equals 2 later on. So well, okay. So right, we're not doing things that much more carefully or formally or highbrow, but I think we're being more so than last time, at least. But that means I think we're still kind of catching up to some of the stuff that we said last time. So last time we may not have said it in this language, but I kind of asked you, about this prop homomorphism, and I asked you sort of like, can you tell me what the kernel ideal of this prop homomorphism is? I hope that terminology makes reasonable sense. The kernel ideal of a prop homomorphism, basically just asking for the equational laws that hold. And let's see, I guess it's also sort of, I was going to say it's sort of obvious. Maybe it's not completely, well, right, to what extent have we even completely specified exactly which prop homomorphism that we're talking about here? If you go back and listen to what we said last time, then I think we were implicitly defining a prop homomorphism. But we do need to, think about possibly other ways of defining this prop homomorphism as well. But from various things we said, it might be more or less obvious that this prop homomorphism is going to end up being a surjective prop homomorphism. A surjective prop homomorphism, so that in some sense, knowing the kernel ideal of this surjective prop homomorphism will in some sense be telling you practically all there is to know about this prop homomorphism. But on the other hand, you could compose this prop homomorphism with the inclusion of the concrete prop of T, the Hecke prop. You could include that into the concrete prop of the underlying vector space of T. So that would be all the tensors on T, not just the invariant ones. And that would not be a surjective prop homomorphism. And the fact that the image of that composite prop homomorphism would be just the Hecke props, that would be one expression of the philosophy that you were suggesting last time, that again, I'm not sure how to say it, that's why it's a philosophy, but it's the idea that the purpose in life of special commutative Frobenius algebras has something to do with representing vector spaces with basises, which means that, or perhaps finite basises, that or something like that, nearly finite, that their purpose in life is something like that, and that I mean, how did you express it? It was something like that. The operations on the the operations in the prop, in the special commutative Frobenius prop, are all the ones that sort of are there because you have a basis or something like that. So, right?
Yeah,
Right, because n bang is the thing that's preserving this basis. So that's why having the hecaprop being the image is agreeing with your philosophy.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with
I didn't say that very well, but
I agree with that at a philosophical level, and I agree that sort of really straightening that out is
it'd be
still
better than what I just said. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I'm not saying it very clearly, but and somebody should say it clearly, but nevertheless, it's on the right track. Right. So one of the questions I asked you was, what's the kernel ideal of this prop homomorphism like? And it sounded to me like you suggested that the whole idea was generated by one equational law or something like that.
Yep, that's my guess. Just a guess. I mean,
okay. I guess I'm confused about whether the guess is correct or not. I have an argument that says it's not correct, but I'm not sure if the argument is really valid. I mean, it may depend on slightly different versions of the question. So I guess your point, right? Part of your point is that if you look at sort of classical, in some sense, classical models of the special commutative Frobenius prop, then they are all just there's one isomorphism class corresponding to each natural number. Is that right?
That's true over an algebraically complete field.
And that's more or less what I meant by classical model.
Okay.
In fact, what I meant
part of what we're trying to part of the most exciting thing about all this stuff here is
sure.
the case not algebraically close. So yeah.
Sure. But that's why classical model is always an insult.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this case, I probably meant classical model like over the complex numbers, or maybe over the algebraic numbers, or something like that. As you said, some algebraically closed field. So in that classical setting, you get one isomorphism class for each n, and you can tell which isomorphism class you're getting by seeing which one of those equational laws that you mentioned holds.
Yep.
So, okay, can you write down what this equational law is?
Yeah, if I hook up my tablet and it doesn't drag my.
Oh, well, that was sort of the point of trying to use this.
I know. Yeah, I know. I still have to do it. I don't want to start it up before it was.
Sure.
Yeah. So while we're getting ready, I'll just mention that this thing about classical models, it is really connected to this Galois descent idea that over an algebraically closed field, the classification of special commutative Frobenius algebras is really supposed to be simple, very easy, just one per dimension. And so then, in a way, that's like a jumping off point for classifying them over non-algebraically closed fields.
That's right.
So, yeah.
And in the homotopy theory analogy, that algebraic closure is like the universal cover of the base space of the covering spaces that we're looking at.
Right. So let's see. So I'm supposed to write down what this law is.
Okay. Yeah, something like that. Make a new page. Yes.
So you have to. So I have to. Okay. So I've got a. So okay. I'm just in just as much trouble as you. Oh no.
Right.
So let's see what's going on here.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah, we are allowed to pause if there's some problems that they need to be.
Yeah. So my computer is so slow that it can't draw the letter A without it. I'm going to stop my video and hope I get a little extra mileage that way. So okay, so
that seems to help.
A here is like a special commutative Frobenius. I will write tensor monoid just to please you.
Well, in this case, it might actually please more to write algebra, because this is, the classical models are the algebras. The tensor monoids are the more abstract things that live in non-classical universes. But you can call it.
But I'm writing down the law.
Okay. Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to just point out that I can write the law.
Sure.
At general abstract level. So okay. So what does this thing have? It has about what are some operations we've got? We've got a multiplication. We've got a unit. So here I is the unit object in our theory.
Okay.
We've got a co-multiplication. I know you're going to be annoyed, but tough.
That's okay.
I'm gonna write the usual notation for a co-multiplication and a co-unit. I guess I like E. So we've got those guys. Those are important operations because they generate all the morphisms in our theory. And so it's sort of just a cute fact that we can string these all together in you can use all four of them, use each one once to get a morphism from the tensor unit to itself. I don't know if there's any deep significance of that fact that we're using them all once, but it's just just true. We can do this. And so we get an endomorphism of the unit. And this is usually in various abstract people. This composite morphism here is sometimes called the dimension of A. It's sort of begging the question as to what it is. And so then the law that one can demand, an extra law one can impose on top of the laws of a special commutative Frobenius tensor monoid, is that this dimension, you can try to demand that this dimension is anything you want. Actually, you can try to demand that this dimension is any particular endomorphism of the unit object, which
if you pick a weird number, that could give interesting results, maybe.
Yeah. So people do sometimes do that weirdness, but here I'm not going to do that. I mean, I won't unless I'm demanded to. So I'm going to just say that it's equal to some natural number, which you can think of the natural numbers as giving you some endomorphisms of the tensor unit, because they just mean the natural number times the identity morphism. So the claim or the hope or guess is that one law is enough when you have one extra law is enough when you have a classical model of this special commutative Frobenius. What I'm trying to say is that any classical model of this theory, that is a model in the category of vector spaces over a algebraically complete field,
yes,
will obey this law for one particular unique n, and then adding that extra law to the laws you already have. Well, adding that extra law to the laws you have singles out among the classical models one model up to isomorphism.
yes, yes,
And by the way, when in some emails to you,
yes,
I was hemming and hawing, and I was saying that, like, I knew that for an algebraically complete field, that if you take any special commutative Frobenius algebra, that this dimension defined this way just is the dimension of that algebra in the usual sense of dimension.
yes.
And so anyway, I just want to go on record now as saying that actually I know it's true for any field.
That's right. That's right. And so that's like, slightly dipping our toes in some non-classical water. So in some sense, if you go beyond the algebraically closed case, but still work over a field, then in some sense, this is still the right idea that, all you need to do to determine the dimension of the algebra you're getting is to check the dimension in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about the dimension of the vector space, but you can also talk about formally the dimension endomorphism of the identity object that you're getting. And those agree whenever you're working over any field, even if it's not algebraically closed. So that's allowing some slightly non-classical possibilities, but we're going to be interested in much more non-classical possibilities than that.
Yeah, by the way, there's a thing that people have thought about.
Yeah.
It's sort of a good thing to think about, maybe, which is that given any model of this theory, you can talk about like some other concept of the dimension where you take.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting into now, but go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, so you can take the smallest number, if there is one, such that the nth exterior power of your model vanishes.
Yes.
Which I think we sometimes call like a subdimension. Well,
something like that. But we did mention it in the emails. But
yeah. So one thing that I think I know people have checked in one context is to check that. So you'd like, the kind of thing you might want to check is that, like, if this law holds, that just using that and using this theory, you could ask, does that imply that the nth exterior power of your, now I'm talking about the A in the model, or just this in this generic model, is equal to 0. So that's like a test of whether you can derive all the things you might want to derive from this law. Can you derive that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. So that's,
yeah, okay.
I mean, what I'm saying is I'm saying a bunch of things here, but one of them I'm saying is that we have an abstract prop homomorphism here, and we can look at the kernel ideal of that prop homomorphism and ask what the generators are for that kernel ideal. And there may be, just because the classical models have their dimension determined by this law that you're suggesting, that doesn't mean that this law actually generates the ideal.
Right.
So we're interested in things like that. So and let's mention a couple of things here. So I mean, let's just mention that there are many, at least various stronger and weaker concepts of dimension or something like dimension that we can talk about in the context of various doctrines here. And so far you mentioned this sort of trace quantitative dimension where you get this endomorphism of the unit object. And in some sense, that's a very weak notion of dimension. But so there's this. So one of the other notions of dimension is that you already mentioned this one, is you can ask for the exterior. You can ask for the n+1th exterior power.
Oh yeah, I said it wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
to be the zero object. But of course, that is, that was the one where we sometimes use terminology like subdimension because, things of smaller dimension also satisfy that same property. But on the other hand, you can also ask for the nth exterior power to be invertible, to be a line object or something like that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have the subdimension flavor to it. The lower dimensional things don't satisfy. But on the other hand, it's a stronger condition than the trace condition. So we're interested in various different things like this. We're interested in various different things like this.
Yeah, the one place where I've seen a bunch of work on that type of thing.
Yeah.
Is in the proof of this Doppler-Roberts reconstruction theorem, where they're trying to
that's interesting,
reconstruct a compact topological group from its category of representations.
So they say,
okay, what are the properties of its category of representations? It's a 2-rig with some extra properties. And they show that in that context, the dimension of any object, so it has to be a natural number, and that you can derive these type of things from its dimension. So once upon a time, I sort of looked at the proof of how they do that stuff.
I mean, it really. I'm now sort of very curious about that because, I'm curious whether they use abstract category theoretic assumptions or delicate analytic assumptions. There's more than one possibility about how you could deal with that.
Yeah, they were category theoretic.
Okay, then they
were more strong assumptions than we're wanting here. They were working over the complex numbers, and they were using some kind of dagger category type assumptions. Basically,
so maybe I should,
from working with representations of compact Lie groups or compact topological groups, but what they could phrase categorically. So it's possible that some of that stuff doesn't work some of those tricks don't work for us, but some of the tricks may still work.
Well, I mean, it looks like I should probably consult that paper if it's one particular paper, or follow work on it. So I mean, because I mean, there's I probably mention this fairly often. There's also like Martin Brandenburg's thesis, where he's not working with dagger categories. He's just working with, I think basically, he's working with something like my total 2 rigs. And he does a lot of this stuff in that context. But on the other hand, some of the stuff that we're doing here, right, is not quite as just some of the stuff we're doing here. I mean, that specifically has to do with the Frobenius prop, the special commutative Frobenius prop, is very much potentially applying the kind of stuff that we're talking about now, but it could be more special or something like that. So I have some more special stuff to say about how the kind of things that you were just talking about how that manifests perhaps in this special commutative Frobenius context. So yeah, so very roughly what I'm trying to say here is that I think, if you actually look at what the kernel ideal of the prop homomorphism is, it's not generated just by this one equational law that you mentioned, and that it is generated by this other stuff, which looks like it has some relationship to those other dimensions of dimensionality, other concepts of dimensionality that we were hinting at. But on the other hand, okay, but let me mention again something slightly philosophical here, which is that we're interested in, well, we're interested in the relationship between special commutative Frobenius algebras and n-bang torsors, or if you prefer less fancy language, in n-element sets. And the hope is that there's a particular n involved, at least when you're working over a single component. So it works in all sorts of ways of understanding what is a particular n that you're getting from a particular special commutative Frobenius algebra or special commutative Frobenius tensor monoid or whatever, depending on how classical or non-classical we're looking. So when you suggested your idea, that you mentioned this one equational law that you suggested, even though I sort of disagree with the idea that it's just a single equational law that should generate this. It was very suggestive to me because, first of all, it kind of like you imported this concept of size from this other context, right? It sounded like you stole the concept of dimension of a vector space to invent this concept of cardinality of a set, which almost seems like a reversal of the usual way of doing things, right? So I found that interesting. That you're sort of saying that we're going to find the cardinality of a set in terms of this maybe more fundamental thing, which is arguably more fundamental thing, which is the dimension of the basis space that it spans, the dimension of the vector space that it spans. And that philosophy that you suggested, makes sense regardless of which definition of dimension of a vector space you're using, right? You can play around with different concepts of dimension of a vector space or abstract dimension of an object, but all of those definitions, all of those various variations on the definition of the dimension of an object, dimension of a vector space, can be used when you're trying to apply this philosophy that you're bringing up, which says that you can try to define the cardinality of a set in terms of the dimension of the vector space that it spans. And so, right, so one of the things I'm saying is that you're in that sense, your suggestion is sort of somewhat robust in the sense that, if a particular dimension, if your philosophy doesn't work or doesn't work well with a particular definition of the dimension of a vector space, then we can try the same philosophy with a different definition of the dimension of a vector space. And, we might be happier with the results of that. So that's sort of like the kind of thing that I'm taking from what you said. And more, I have a sort of mental picture of this. I mean, it's a very vague mental picture, but it's a mental picture that sort of helps me a bit. It's sort of suggestive in some way. And it's just this idea of a finite set comfortably embedded in its linear span, its free linear span.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, this reminds me of the themes in like homotopy theory, where like
a
roomy enough codimension is like as good as being totally abstract. And so this seems like some sort of potentially interesting manifestation of that philosophy from homotopy theory, that, if you want to get rid of the cramping effect of a low dimensional ambient space, all you have to do is just take sufficiently roomy ambient space, sufficiently high codimension, and you can completely eliminate, in very many cases, you can reach the stable regime where the codimension is high enough so that it's like, you have all the room you would ever want. And
so one thing that suggests here is that instead of just thinking about this structure you can put on a vector space, which is saying that it has a chosen basis.
Yes.
Say it has n linearly independent vectors in it. You could try to come up with some prop for that, or some theory for that.
Yes. I mean, there are all sorts of variations here. Yes. I mean, if I understand what you're saying, that's sort of going along with vague ideas that we've previously suggested along the lines of, we've thought about n-bang torsors, but then you can also think about torsors of the monoid of endo injections of a set. Did I say that right? Yeah, there aren't too many endo injections. But unless you get into infinite stuff, then you can have infinite. You can have interesting injections. So that's a possibility. But even even for a finite set, you can have interesting endo maps that are neither injective nor surjective. And I'm vaguely trying to connect that with the ideas that you're suggesting now. And it also reminds me of, I mean, in some sense, one of the things that's lurking in the background is we're talking in some doctrine, lurking in the background is like there's the theory of a set, but then there's the theory of a decidable set, which is a set which has an equivalence relation, the set with the notion of equality of elements. And that in some doctrines, that's very different and very interestingly different syntactic category from the theory of a set, the theory just of an object. And there are all sorts of possibilities here. I thought you might be hinting at something like that, but I'm not even sure I was interpreting correctly what you were saying.
Yeah, those things sound a bit different than what I was.
Well, can you say it again what you were saying? Because I thought, well, go ahead.
Well, when you were talking about like in homotopy theory, we might want to think about like an n-element subset of a high-dimensional vector space. And the space of those is, with a fixed high-dimensional vector space, is a very interesting space to think about. And so I was just noticing that idea.
I thought you were trying to remove the restriction that we have no more room than you need, so that you could have, just as long as you have
Right.
more
Yeah.
you need.
Well, yeah. So anyway, so I'm to be able to talk about an n element, well, an n element linearly independent set in some vector space, where we allow the vector space to have a high dimension, then we need some kind of notion of a theory of a vector space with an n element linearly independent set. Whereas what we've been groping for here on this page is like a theory of a vector space with an n element basis. I actually think I see how to get the other theory. I think you probably don't want to hear about it, but you could say you've got a vector space and you have a projection from it onto some subspace. So you have a projection operator on it, an idempotent operator, and then make that the range of that idempotent be a special commutative Frobenius algebra.
Well,
that sounds a little clunky, but
I mean, there are all sorts of possibilities here, and we probably shouldn't worry about too much about getting into this. But I think it is connected to what I was suggesting with it. So, again, I shouldn't get into this, but too much. I just can't resist saying a little bit about this. That, like I mentioned, that sometimes there's the theory of a decidable set, meaning a set with a notion of equality between elements. And so, it's like in the geometric doctrine, that theory makes sense, and it's very interesting. Although it did get beyond pre-sheaf toposes. I'm trying to avoid getting into too many complications here. Actually, you can just use pre-sheaf toposes. Sorry, I have to think about that. What was I trying to say? That, in Lovier's philosophy of logical quantifiers as adjoints and stuff like that, there's this idea that there's a sort of duality between the existential quantifier and equality. It's a sort of duality. And, equality has to do with injections versus non-injections, and the existential quantifier has to do with surjections versus non-surjections. And so there are, I never worked this out, I'm not sure who has worked it out, but there's vague ideas about some sort of theory where the models have sort of ghost particles that don't really exist. So there's like a predicate which says that something actually exists or something like that. And this vaguely reminds you of the idea of having extra dimensions that you don't really use. It's like it's like some Dirac sea of extra stuff that you don't really use or something like that. But I'm being very vague now. I shouldn't really get into this at all. But I just thought it might be related to what you were talking about. But yeah, let me try to get away from this because there's more interesting stuff to look at here. So let's think about this alleged prop homomorphism that we have, and we're trying to understand the kernel ideal. So first of all, let's play around with some like dimension numerology of the props here. Well, the prop on the left has infinite dimensional operation spaces, right? Because it has all this, again, it has sort of like a Dirac sea or Dirac pond or something like that of these unused elements in the cospan, the things that aren't in the image of the cospan. They just kind of see, right? One of the things that bugs me about your definition of dimension in terms of this bubble trace or something like that is once you create those bubbles, it's hard to do anything with them. They just kind of hang around and get in the way or something like that. So it's hard for me to see how those could, how equational laws that constrain that could affect other stuff.
I mean, the way that Doppler and Roberts do it, by the way, is they try to calculate the dimension in the same sense of the exterior powers of A.
Yeah.
And they do that by taking the tensor power of A and then applying this anti-symmetrization projection, where you're like summing over all permutations in n-bang with minus signs thrown in. And then they try to compute the dimension of that. So let me just draw a picture just to sort of show you what the hell I'm talking about. So like,
well, it sounds like you're telling me what I was going to tell you, but go ahead.
Okay, well, yeah. So like if I try to calculate the dimension of lambda 2 of A.
Yeah.
So what I do is I know that like lambda 2 involves anti-symmetrizing. So it involves something like, now I'm using string diagram notation that you don't.
Right.
That you don't. And then, well, there's a 1/2 here. I should multiply this whole thing by 1/2.
Okay, fair enough. Right.
And then if I try to calculate the dimension of this thing, I have to.
Oh, yeah.
So I get something like, I may have gotten this wrong, but it's something like this plus this.
Yeah. Oh,
then you can like unwind this stuff to get a whole bunch of bubbles.
Okay, but let me say something about that, okay?
Sure, yeah.
So this is very interesting, and it presumably works in the context that we're doing it. But there's certain things that are being used in that kind of argument that I'm not sure to what extent they're available. I mean, it's delicate to what extent they're available in our context, because we're working with props at this point, and so the props don't. On the face of it, the props don't have these exterior powers in them. Now, it's possible that the exterior powers could sort of be secretly available in some way by means of absoluteness tricks of the kind that Todd Trimble.
Yeah. Well, if you somehow throw in absolute colimits,
But I'm not even sure about that. That's a little bit tricky. I found myself. I mean, that might work. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure how well it works. Because I was getting into some level slip. I mean, like, what am I trying to say? That what am I trying to say? I'm not sure. I'm too confused about that to say anything intelligent about that. But that's a possibility. But I'm confused about how well it works. There's a possibility that you might be able to simulate the kind of arguments that you're talking about, that Doppler and Roberts, or whoever it was.
Yeah.
That you might be able to simulate the arguments that the kind of arguments that they were doing in this very prop context, but by using some sort of absoluteness of Schur functors. I guess I'm just confused about whether it's really is absoluteness of Schur functors what we need, or is there really absoluteness of something else that we need here? I'm not quite sure. But in any case, I'm going to do this I'm going to do something similar to what Doppler and Roberts did here. Apparently, going by my vague understanding of your description of what they did, I think I'm going to be doing something similar to that, but I think in a somewhat more lowbrow way. So let me try to go ahead and do that now. Okay.
Let me just interrupt and show you this thing.
Yes, go ahead.
So I just remembered how it worked.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
So the dimension of lambda so if I get to do these calculations in a context where I get to do these calculations.
Yeah.
So the dimension of lambda squared of A is 1. So I take A tensor A, apply this anti-symmetrization operator, so the identity minus the switch.
Yeah.
And so that, well, that divided by 2 is anti-symmetrization. So 2 times the dimension of lambda squared A is equal to this thing. But that's the first term has a single bubble, the second has 2 bubbles. And so that means that the dimension of lambda squared of A is the dimension of A tensor A. That's this. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
minus the dimension of A.
Yeah.
So factoring it out, it's dimension of lambda squared of A is 1/2 the dimension of A times the dimension of A minus 1. We get these triangular number kind of things showing up, or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And so one thing you get from that is that if the dimension of A, defined in the trace way, is either 0 or 1, then the dimension of lambda squared of A has to be 0. So lambda squared of A had better be the 0 object. I guess we need to know that, like, the only object of dimension 0 is the 0 object. So yeah, so we actually are getting this kind of implication here in a world where we can do these kind of calculations. And I agree that the prop world may not quite be enough, but I think when you get to the theory and the doctrine world, where you get to do anti-symmetrization, because you've got colimits, then I think we can do it. And even in this, and with Todd and I, we often use these absolute 2 rigs, and you can even do it there.
Yes. 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 Oh, well, I mean, in some sense, the prop is as good as the absolute 2 rig. But there's I don't know. We're a little bit short on time, but
anyway, I just wanted to show you that calculation.
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of semi-subtle questions here that I'm not very clear on yet. But I want to tell you some very lowbrow ways of thinking about some of the kinds of problems that we're dealing with here. I'm gonna do something that works very purely at the prop level.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm just gonna go ahead and try and do it here. So let's see. Am I allowed to add the new page? Well, yeah, I'm not sure I can add the new page.
For some weird reason, only I'm...
Okay. All right. So what am I trying to say here? So I've been talking about Hecke props and Hecke tensors. But let's try to, let's try to get somewhat explicit combinatorially about what these Hecke tensors are. So, right, so the Hecke, how does it work? The Hecke operators correspond to double cosets. The basic Hecke operators correspond to double cosets. That's the basic idea of how Hecke algebras are so nice to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about Hecke tensors is, the joke is that the Hecke tensors correspond to J tuple. Hecke tensors with J indexes, a total of J indexes, input and output indexes, correspond to J tuple cosets. Except that, J tuple cosets doesn't actually mean anything, but it doesn't mean anything if you, parse it too literally, but it just means the components of the jth Cartesian power of the permutation representation of the group action from which we're getting the permutation representation. So just something about the way that you were mentioning Doppler and Roberts using the nth tensor power or something that reminds me of this nth Cartesian power or something like that. And maybe it's secretly the same thing, but we're doing it more in a Frobenius context, so there's more basis is involved. But anyway, So, like I say, let's, assume that n equals 3. And let's try to figure out what the hecatensors are for j equals 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's try to figure out how many of them there are. So how many of them are there? let's try to figure that out. So what are we trying to say? We're trying to say these are all right. These are all the different possible arrangements of what? Of j points. Yeah, all the different flavors of j tuples in a 3-element set.
Okay.
So there's only one flavor of 0 tuple in a 3-element set, right?
Yeah.
And when we say flavors, we mean, these orbits under the action of the group that preserves the structure. But there is no structure. It's just, it's the group that of all the permutations. So they're not preserving any particular structure, but that means that they are preserving just, the background structure of equality.
Yeah.
So it's kind of equality is kind of like the only built-in predicate that we can use to create these flavors, these complexions of j tuples of elements. So there's just one flavor of 0 tuple, still just one flavor of 1 tuple, right?
Yep.
And how many flavors of 2 tuples are there? I guess they can be the same or they can be different. What?
Yep.
And how many flavors of 3 tuples are there?
They can all be the same. 2 can be the same and not the third, and none can be the same.
Yes. So, and there were basically 3 choices of that middle thing that you said. So that's really 5 choices, right?
Oh, sorry. For some reason, I was thinking about unordered tuples, but these are ordered.
That's right. These are ordered j tuples. That's right. Ordered j tuples. That's right. That's right. And so if we didn't have this constraint that there are only 3 things to talk about, we could, keep on, right? So far you said really that there's 1 equivalence relation on a 0-element set. There's 1 equivalence relation on a 1-element set. There's 2 equivalence relations on a 2-element set. There's 5 equivalence relations on a 3-element set. If you kept on going with that, that would be the Bell numbers, and that would be like 15 or something like that. And then I can remember, is it 15? And then what's the next one? Is it 52? The only one I think I remember is somewhere in there. There's a 203 because I had never run across the number 203 before, so it was easy to remember.
I remember 52 because of some weird thing about cards.
You actually remember that it's a Bell number? There's a
I think I was
card trick that involves the Bell number. Yeah, it might be. Yeah, go ahead. What?
I don't think it's a card trick. No, it's just like when you see the number 52. What's interesting about the number 52? Okay. Okay.
I'll bet somebody has invented, those crazy people who do card tricks. They invented a card trick that involves the 5th Bell number. Must be a poker or thing or something like that. Right, right. And so in fact, right, this would be counting like the correlations depending on the number of indexes. J being the number of indexes. This would be the correlations. So right, this is already suggestive.
Yeah.
Right. This is sort of an asymptotic limit where n is getting big. But if we're fixing n equals 3, then it's actually 1, 1, 2, 5. But right, we were like kind of pushing the limit when we got the 5th one because we had them all being distinct, and we just
right.
That was our last thing we could do. So that means that when you get to the 15, there's actually one that you can't do. So it's actually 14, which to me is very annoying because this means there must be another sequence that looks like the Catalan numbers, but it's not the Catalan numbers. At least I have trouble believing that it's the Catalan number. Is that how the Catalan numbers start out?
It is, but I don't believe this would be
Yeah.
next time. But the 52 does remind me of the 42, by the way. But
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the next one is. I don't know what the next one is. But the point is, right? The point is that this is very suggestive in a good way, in terms of making these hecatensors sound a bit like the operations, a little bit like the operations in the special commutative Frobenius prop. Because, right, the operations in the special commutative Frobenius prop are cospands, basically. And here we're getting something that are like correlations, but there's like a bound on the size of the apex or something like that.
So the correlations then would be like that first column, right?
Yeah, I think I did say that. The Bell numbers is counting the correlations, but I mean it's usually just called the partitions or the equivalence relations or something like that. But here we're emphasizing that you're splitting up the indexes. You know, J is equal to J1 plus J2, and J1 is the input indexes, and J2 is the input indexes. But somehow I just find myself not caring about the difference between the input indexes and the output indexes, because there's some sort of built-in index raising and lowering here that makes me just not care about it very much.
Yeah, it's because special commutative Frobenius monoids are self-dual in a canonical way.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably, yes, there's very simple things going on there, but nevertheless, they're
fun. Anyway,
they're not so simple as to prevent me from getting confused about it. But go ahead. Yes.
Well, anyway, you're just making me curious about what the combinatorics of this. What are these two index family of numbers that you're starting to draw a rectangular chart of numbers that's sort of pretty interesting. So I don't know what it is.
Well,
like the sub-Bell numbers, or something.
Right. It's let me say something stupid about it, which is right there. So there are different ways of counting partitions. So you were tempted to say that there were just three partitions of a three-element set, because you were counting the partitions in a different way, and you were just basically describing the three-box Young diagrams.
Right. Right.
But then if you use that kind of way of counting partitions, which is a little bit coarser, then when you start putting a limit on the number of equivalence classes, then you're constraining the number of rows in the Young diagram, which is kind of suggestive in some way. That's the stupid thing I wanted to say. I mean, here we're counting partitions in a different way. That's where,
So you can, in terms of Young diagrams, you could think of these things as like Young diagrams where the boxes are all labeled from one to the number of boxes.
Like
Tableau that are not
something
semi-standard.
Something like that might be true, but I'm also afraid of saying something incorrect if I don't. I might have to think about that too long to say it correctly, but it might, something like that might be correct. Probably is correct. So right, the point is this is supposed to be suggestive, right? That this prop homomorphism that we're looking at, we have the vague idea that it should be taking, co-spans to very similar co-spans or correlations or something like that. And
sorry, what do you mean very similar correlations?
Well, I was thinking, for example, that these correlations don't have these, these Dirac ghosts or whatever you call them,
right?
These bubbles that
I actually know
float off into the universe. What?
Anyone listening to this would never know what you meant unless they. But I know what you mean, so it's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's one thing. That's what makes the first column actually be finite numbers that we're counting correlations instead of cospans.
Yes.
But then how is that related? Well, anyway, I thought you were going to talk about something interesting about how the first column is related to the other columns. I mean, all the other columns, it's true, we're getting them to be, the numbers in them to be finite by thinking about.
So first of all, what you're calling the first column is really the infinitieth column. It's an asymptotic column, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay, and what were you saying?
You started talking about these ghosts and so on when I thought you were going to be talking about something about these other columns.
Yeah, we are talking about these other columns. Yes. So, like I say, it's something of the flavor of constraining the size of the apex. So, in other words, right? It's like I'm vaguely suggesting that this prop homomorphism should kill off the prop homomorphism if, you know, the naive conjecture would be that it just kills off the. Well, I guess the naive one would be that it kills off the things that have too many elements in the image. And then the ones that have elements in the non-image, it turns those into numbers or something like that.
It turns those into, yeah, anyway, yeah. Okay, I know it. Okay, yeah. I won't start arguing.
You can. I mean, it depends on how much overtime you want to go into.
I don't want to go over too much, so that's fine.
Okay.
If you want to tell me stuff and not having me argue,
okay.
you should tell me right near the end. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, say it again. I should do what?
I'm joking. If you want to tell me stuff and not have me argue about nuances, you should tell me right at the end when I'm eager to be done with it. But anyway, there are actually interesting nuances.
It's more like I do want you to, you know, find my mistakes. I want you to find my mistakes. So, you know, I want you to look for nuance to a certain extent. Just don't look, you know, look for the right kind of nuance. Look for the annoying kind of nuance.
Look for the interesting mistakes.
Yes, look for the interesting mistakes. But what I'm trying to argue is that we're close enough to a punchline here that, you know, we might go a little bit over time, but not that much. So you don't have to worry. I don't think you have to worry that much about stretching things out. If you,
can I give you a comic interlude while you get ready to say your last thing? Or
sure. No, that's fine. That sounds good.
Okay, I'm going to give you a
that's
comic.
Kind of nuance I like. Yeah, go ahead.
Which means, oh no, let's see. Oh, but I may need. Never mind. I may need to share another portion of the screen, which may kill this whiteboard. So go ahead and finish.
No. I think that's fine because I'm actually, you know, I think I'm more or less done with this screen. So you can go ahead.
I'll just see what it does. I don't know what it's going to do to the
sure.
whiteboard. But this is a very comic interlude. So it's this paragraph here. So this is what it was. First, an exhaustive enumeration of set partitions, that's these ones counted by the bell numbers, appears to have occurred in medieval Japan, where inspired by the popularity of the tale of Genji, a parlor game called Genjiko sprang up, in which guests were given 5 packets of incense to smell and were asked to guess which ones were the same and which were different. And there were 52 possible solutions, counted by the bell number B5, and they were drawn as 15 different diagrams, which are printed above the chapter headings in some editions of the Tale of Genji. And I've seen those pictures. There's some kind of pictures of the 52 things we were just talking about.
Yeah, I'm glad you told me about that. I didn't know about that. You knew about this before, or you were just seeing the pictures before?
I knew about it before, because I was teaching combinatorics, and I think I thought somewhere in this article they actually seems to be gone now, but I think they had a picture of those things. So anyway,
well, maybe you should click on the Genji stuff, but let's not worry about that right now. So now let me try to get back to go ahead.
Well, I will attempt to
attempt to get back.
I'll attempt to get back to
I think it should work, but
whiteboard. I don't know if the whiteboard has died. Yeah, it's still there. Okay, good.
Okay.
So on the number 52. So now I know 4 interesting things about the number 52.
Okay. Can you go to new page here?
Yep. It's also the number of weeks in a year, of course.
Oh,
as well as the number of. Yeah, so there's like this weird calendar
what week is
relationship
this?
to the.
Yes, right. What week is this? Is this the Ace of Diamonds or what?
That's right. And which chapter of the Tale of Genji is it? Yeah, so.
Well, yes. So, well, let me put it this way. This guess that the prop homomorphism is sort of killing off the naive conjecture would be that the prop homomorphism is killing off the cospans with excessively large image. And that's a little bit too naive, but if you just fix it up slightly, it actually seems to be correct. And the way to fix it up is that we should distinguish between we should distinguish right. I mean, so we originally had a set valued prop, which we called the special commutative Frobenius prop, right? Mm-hmm. But then we turned it into a vector valued prop, but we still thought of those, those operation spaces as having this basis. So I call that the Frobenius basis for the Frobenius prop. Okay. Mm-hmm. But there's another interesting basis for the Frobenius prop, which I'll call the Hecke basis. And the Hecke basis is basically obtained from the Frobenius basis by Möbius inversion with respect to the lattice of correlations. Let's see. I'm being a little bit sloppy here about what happens to the the points in the non-image of the cospan. I mean, we still have very interesting questions how those relate, right? Because those are the things, the non-image of the cospan is the things that's related to your equational law. But somehow I'm completely ignoring those, and I'm looking at all this other stuff. So okay, here's the part where we get scared by n equals 3, so big, because it's hard to visualize. Well, it's hard to draw three-dimensional things on paper. So here's the part where I retreat to where's my thing here? I'm looking for the
probably reclaim it.
I just have to find this thing on the screen. I'm not seeing it here. But okay, we're both seeing the, where is it? View option.
I can still draw, but you may have to reclaim the power of the pen.
Remote control. No, that's not it. I don't want remote control of your account. It's just that there's supposed to be this thing that lets me change color and do stuff. Well, okay, I'll try it. Okay, maybe this is good enough for now. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I did find that thing. Okay. So what am I trying to say here? That this is where I retreat to n equals 2, because I can draw two index. Is it? Let's see. Now I'm getting confused between n and j, right? We had n and j. N, we were dealing with n bang, but we were dealing with j index tensors. So now what do I want? Do I want n equals 2 and j equals 3? Actually, I'm a little bit confused here. I'm just experiencing confusion between n and j here. Let's see. I know I'm going to be dealing with. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be dealing with things I can draw on paper. So that's matrices with 2 indexes. What am I trying to say?
Wasn't j the number of indices?
J was the number of indexes. Oh, okay. Okay. I guess I was jumping the gun a little bit. I guess. Right. Okay.
So maybe you just got N and J backwards. You look at the
No, I did. It's not just that I got N and J backwards. It's that at a certain point in the discussion, I'm going to switch them the values. But you're right that I should have had the other ones here. So it should be, what is it? It's like, okay, for now it's N equals, sorry, is it? Sorry, this is doing things that drive me up the wall, but maybe I can deal with it. Okay, N equals 3. Okay, and J equals 2. Okay, so that means I right. This is the point where I'm drawing 3 by 3 matrices, right? That's what a J index tensor looks like when the basis has 3 elements.
Yeah.
So let me draw what the Hecker tensors look like in this case, okay? There's one that looks like that, which is, right, I always get confused between, which ones are the coarse equivalence relations and which ones are the fine equivalence relations. So there's one that looks like, well, it's basically equals and not equals, right?
Yeah.
And but right now I have, so I guess that means that this is the fine equivalence relation and this is the coarse equivalence relation, right? And I guess the edges that the equality things in the equivalence relation, the edges in the equivalence relation are sort of indicating correlations between the dimensions. Well, it's something like that. But anyway, these are the two equivalence relations written as 0, 1 matrices.
I mean, the second thing is not an equivalence relation written as a 0, 1 matrix. It's not equality is not an equivalence relation. There's some other thing that's an equivalent.
Right. So I didn't say it right. What am I trying to say? I mean, these are the Hecker tensors. These are the orbits.
Yep.
Right. These are the orbits. But now you got me confused. Maybe you just kind of gave the answer that. So these are the Hecker tensors, but these are not really the corresponding Frobenius things. The corresponding Frobenius things are, this one, which is still the same.
Oh, okay.
And this one, which is,
I see, the identical all ones.
Yeah. So maybe it's actually,
so those are equivalence relations.
They are equivalence relations, and maybe they're the closure of the the logical, the equation of the, maybe you just the transitive closure or something of the other things or something like that. But I was thinking of them as just the like I say, I was thinking of Möbius inversion with respect to the lattice of correlations. So you know what I'm saying, that not equals is a more generic thing than equals. So my rule here is that the less generic things cling to the more generic things. So so this is in the Hecker basis, and this is in the Frobenius basis. And so right, I mean, so that I'm claiming there's a Möbius inversion thing. So which direction is the Möbius inversion and which direction is the Möbius exversion? So I guess this is the Möbius exversion, and this is the Möbius inversion.
Yep, I believe it.
So it works like that.
That's cool.
And right, and right, and now it makes sense that the thing that was too naive was to think that the Frobenius basis elements would get killed off in a in an n-dimensional Frobenius algebra. But it's actually the Hecke basis, the excessively large Hecke basis elements that are getting killed off. So do you see what I'm saying? Now I'm now claiming that there are, in principle, equational laws that we can write down. Sorry, can you go to the new page now?
Yeah.
I'm claiming that there are equational laws that we can write down that that at the prop level, as far as I can tell, unless I'm screwing up, it seems to me at the prop level, the equational law that I'm about to write down is not implied by the bubble quantization law that you mentioned. So let me right. So this is actually going to be right. Now I'm thinking of n equals 2, j equals 3.
Okay.
Because the point is, right now j is too big for n. So there's this jth Hecke tensor that's going to get killed off by a two-dimensional Frobenius algebra. So it's going to look very much like a Möbius inversion thing. So let me just see if I can write down the law here. So it's like, how does this work? A, B, C minus A, B, C, and then minus the other 3. The total of 3, the other 2. A, C, and B minus B, C, and A plus 2 times A, B, C is killed off. So that's this law that holds in any two-dimensional for some, right? This is the law. You can take this as a law that defines what a two-dimensional Frobenius algebra is. Again, right? There are slightly different concepts of what a two-dimensional Frobenius algebra is, and we still haven't proved whether they're all equivalent or, they're probably all classically equivalent, but they could be non-classically equivalent depending on what, the doctrine is that we're using that tells us what the non-classical models are. So, right, do you see what this is? This, right? So this is the lattice of equivalence relations on the set ABC has like A, B, C separately at the top, I think, and then A, let's see, is it separately? No, maybe I should put the one where they're all. See, I'm having trouble remembering which way this goes. I mean, you can draw it upside down. Let's see. So where's okay? Let's see. How does this work? I'm agonizing over whether I should draw the lattice upside down or right side up, and it's probably a stupid thing to agonize about. But it's just this lattice that looks like. And I know right in the middle, it's like A and B and C and A and B and C and no, sorry. Let me undo that. Why isn't that working? Oh, it's working too slow. Be there. Okay. And then I'm agonizing about, is it that?
Yeah. Well, just pretend you haven't made up your convention.
All right, but all right, I'll do it. I'll do it this way. I think that's the way I did it. But right, you can sort of see how the Möbius inversion works here, or you can maybe we don't have enough time to really stare at it. But this is what this is. And so I checked this in the Frobenius algebra. Well, first of all, how does the notation work? So putting things next to each other is just multiplication, okay?
Uh-huh.
And putting the round brackets, the parentheses around something, that's the co-unit. And that's all you need to demonstrate what's going on here. I mean, right, there are other things involving co-multiplication and unit and stuff like that, but this is good enough to illustrate the principle.
So you're building up maps from the third tensor power of a Frobenius algebra. No, from the third tensor power of a Frobenius algebra to itself.
Something like that. I mean, this
built using multiplication and the co-unit.
I think actually, no, I'm not doing endo things here. So this is just using multiplication and co-unit. So this is all going from something to nothing.
Oh, so even though it's n equals 2, you're not thinking of it as...
That's right. That's right. I just made all of my indexes input indexes because I found output indexes too annoying.
Okay.
So, yeah. Can you you can draw freely here, can't you? Can you help draw these cospans for me as string diagrams or something like that? Or maybe
I'm trying to figure out how to do it. I don't know if I get it.
So let's see. I guess there's three things. And right. This is the one that, after you Möbius invert it, should die off. Because it's got three things in the middle. Yeah.
That's this one here.
I think that's actually this. Well, it's like, right? I mean, the thing that should die off, we're trying to kill off something in the Hecke basis. But all these things are things in the Frobenius basis.
But in the Frobenius basis, I would draw this one. A, B, C is this thing here, right? The co-unit applied to A, co-unit applied to B, co-unit applied to C. Is that right?
I guess you're right.
And so then the other ones are like, sorry. I don't know why this
yeah, I am suffering some sort of up down vertigo here, but I'm pretty sure it works out.
So
let's see.
So I'm trying to draw something slowly here. So
okay.
So I'm claiming that there's some kind of thing where this thing you're calling ABC. God damn, everything's so buggy. Is like this. Sorry, and
yeah,
ABC is something like this.
So now you do really got me worried that I maybe wrote something upside down or something like that. But it worked out when I tested it.
And then you're talking about like A, B, C, this. Something like that. That's in one of the two bases. That's the Frobenius basis.
Yeah, I think that's right.
At least I get it. Okay. So anyway, at least I think I get what the hell you're talking about.
Yes.
So then you take something that you know vanishes in the Hecke basis, you express it in terms of the Frobenius basis, and you hope you.
Yeah, right. I mean, like like right. I mean, this is like what am I trying to say? It's like A1, A2, times B1, B2. Am I saying this right? Let's see.
What's that notation?
Well, I'm trying to say functions. I'm thinking of the Frobenius algebra of functions on a two-element set, and I'm writing the functions on a two-element set as ordered pairs.
Okay.
So I'm trying to see. So we have A1. So this is one function, A1, A2, and I multiply it times another function, B1, B2, and I get A1, B1 times A2, B2. No, comma, A2, B2. Sorry. Let me just say A1 times B1, comma, A2 times B2.
Yep.
But what am I trying to say?
You're retreating down to j equals 2 and seeing what the laws are?
I guess I am a little bit, but I'm trying to say that, what am I trying to say? That if I do A1, comma, B1, and then I take the unit of that, the co-unit of that, that will be A1 plus B1. And oh, right. If you take if you take the co-unit at the end, then you just get these two terms, right? So right, this is the thing where you take the co-unit at the end, so you're getting 8 terms. No, you're getting only 2 terms. Is that right? No, is that right?
First you're multiplying them and then you're summing them up?
Yeah. First so this is the thing with only 2 terms?
No, that has a bunch of terms. You're taking 3 triples of numbers.
No, these are pairs of numbers. Oh.
Well, you were doing j equals 3. Now you're doing j equals
2. All right, you got me confused here. So n is the thing that determines the dimension of the Frobenius algebra.
Ah, okay, so it's my fault. Well, yeah. Yeah.
N is the
right,
thing
okay.
that determines
yeah, okay, it's fine. So
okay.
Pairs of numbers, and then
Yes.
you're.
So this is going to be, yeah, this is going to be
Yeah, I'll have just 2 terms. You take 3 pairs of numbers, multiply them.
all right. And then this is going to be what? This is going to be 4 terms. And this is going to be 4 terms, and this is going to be 4 terms. And this, but this thing over here is going to be
8 terms.
8 terms.
Yeah.
So this, see, I may have something backwards here, right? Because this would say 16 plus 2 is 18 minus 12. Yeah, that's not great. I must have it backwards or something. Do I have the notation backwards or something like that? See, if we had 8 terms minus 4 minus 4 minus 4 plus 2 times 4. That's not balancing out either. Let's see.
It's not working either.
All right. Let's see. Do I have something totally screwed up? Right. Maybe maybe I made a mistake and this isn't working at all, or maybe I'm just making some stupid mistake. Let's see. I was trying to say that if you have this thing where you've got 1 term for each corner of the square, so you have 8, And then you subtract off these four things. What am I trying to say? All right.
I think I want to. I think I want to quit.
I think we should quit. I think we should quit just because it's not working. Just because I need to fix this.
Yeah. But anyway, I think something like this should work. Yeah,
Okay, but I really need to fix this and tell you how it does work, or find out that it can't be fixed and tell you that it doesn't work. So that's that's what I'll really aim for next time. But because I really thought I tested this on the complex numbers and I thought it did work, but I need to check again. Maybe I screwed up. And the complex numbers example, right? Because so that's an interesting example because it's right. It's not right. That's the sort of slightly non-classical thing where it's not algebraically, where it's a Frobenius algebra over the real numbers, and the real numbers is not algebraically closed. So that's what we're counting as slightly non-classical. And when I thought about that, the interesting thing I learned from that, and again, I'll have to check and see whether this makes whether all this makes sense. But the interesting thing I thought I learned from that was that in those quadratic field extension examples, or in any field extension example, basically any nice field extension you can make into a Frobenius algebra over the thing you're extending. And the co-unit in that case is what's called the trace, which is, the sum of all the conjugates. So that was supposed to be my punchline, but there's no punchline. I have to go home and check and see if I can fix this and get it to working, because right at the moment it's just screwed up. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought your real punchline would be you figured out what the co-unit is, and then you check to see if these relations hold in those non-standard models.
Well, the really good punchline, which I knew I would never get to because I haven't worked it out yet, is to reconcile all these different concepts of dimension of a Frobenius algebra, coming from different doctrines and different classical universes and non-classical universes, relating it to the Doppler-Rabbits and stuff like that. That would be a great punchline if I had it, but I don't have that punchline.
Yep, sure.
So so I was stuck with these other punchlines, but even this other punchline, this one here, this one isn't quite working yet. So I need to go home and fix that.
Yep.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, great.
I'll see you.
Yep.